Welcome to the Crime Redefined podcast, produced by Zero Cliff Media. Coming to you from the US Bank Tower, high above downtown Los Angeles. In our podcast, we drill deep into forensics and criminal investigation from the viewpoint of the defense, as well as explore the intersection of the media and the justice system.
Hello, Crime Redefined listeners. Thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you are enjoying our series on the case of People versus Jane Dorotik. Our big finish is a two-parter, and it's what you've been waiting for.
Yeah, this is the big one, Dion. So in this episode, we present part one of our conversation with Jane Dorotik herself. And Jane was kind enough to give us a very lengthy and I think meaningful interview that gives us what we were looking for. And that is the view of this case from the inside out.
Absolutely, Mehul. Well, of course, Jane needs no further introduction, and we're about to learn much more about her journey to justice. Let's do a quick review of her case, Mehul.
Yeah, so as a recap, the body of Robert Dorotik was found in a wooded area in North San Diego County on Monday, February 14th of 2000. His wife, Jane Dorotik, had reported him missing the previous day when he had not returned from a jog. In June of 2001, Jane was convicted for the murder of her husband and sentenced to 25 years to life.
In 2016, Jane finally was awarded post-conviction DNA testing on evidence in her case. It was at this time that she started working with the Loyola Project for the Innocent. We previously had Paula and Adam from LPI on Crime Redefined. The results of the 2016 DNA testing were deemed not helpful at the time.
While LPI continued to work feverishly on Jane's case, she was granted a temporary release due to COVID in April of 2020. Meanwhile, additional post-conviction DNA testing was performed, and LPI was developing lots of new evidence. Jane's conviction was overturned in July of 2020.
Unfortunately, Jane's ordeal was not over, however. The DA's office decided to conduct DNA testing of their own and pursue retrying Jane. After a lengthy preliminary hearing, a new trial was imminent. On the eve of trial, the DA's office announced that they were dismissing the case.
Well, Dion, I'll just give my standard disclaimer that, obviously I was involved in this case. I worked as a DNA expert, and I have met and, spoken with Jane previously.
So with that, Crime Redefined fans, you are in for a treat, a very inside look at a wrongful conviction told by Jane Dorotik herself.
Well, Jane, thank you so much for joining us on Crime Redefined today.
You're welcome. Happy to be here.
Well, has it sunk in yet that, you no longer have to worry day and night about another trial?
The whole concept of freedom continues to sink in as I move along. It's amazing to me where I will be doing something quite normal and suddenly say, hey, this is really and truly over for me.
Right.
And so it's really nice.
Jane, we really appreciate you taking the time to talk about your ordeal and then also what we can learn from it. I knew that Mehul was working on your case all these years, but he really kept his cards close to the vest. So this is a really great interview for us.
Good, great.
So can you start, Jane, by kind of setting the stage for us and kind of describe what your life was like, right prior to the day that Bob went missing?
Sure. We were living in San Diego. We were leasing a large ranch property because of the horse facilities on it. And I was continuing my corporate job, so doing a lot of travel up and down the state of California with the company that I worked for, and also doing what we called racehorse recycles, mainly a credit to my daughter's great training ability and riding ability. We would take racehorses that were no longer able to race for a variety of reasons. Maybe they just didn't have the proper winning attitude, or maybe they had some slight injury that would cause the trainer to require a 30, more like a 6-month layup. And it's just not economically feasible for many trainers. So many decent horses that can do well in a second career are tossed away. And so we worked with a couple of agents and would buy and sell horses, retrain them as hunter jumpers. And that was the reason for leasing the large ranch, to see if we could really financially make a go of it. I mean, I've been involved in horses pretty much all my life, and it's sort of a fantasy to think that you're going to earn money on horses. They're a big financial drain more than anything else. But this seemed like an ability for us. And so that's what we were doing. My daughter was living with us in between condos at the time. My husband was starting a new business of his own, building PVC jumps for horse arenas. And so that's what we were doing.
Jane, from the time that you reported that Bob was missing until a few days later when you were arrested, would you describe who was in and out of your house and the master bedroom in particular?
When I reported Bob missing around 7:30 the evening, when he didn't come back, and what happened is I was in the house at 1 o'clock calling our ranch hand who worked for us 7 days a week. He worked 2 half days and 5 full days, because in a horse operation, there's an awful lot of work cleaning stalls. And so that's why he worked for us 7 days a week. And he knew that he was supposed to be there. But I was always quite flexible, telling him, if you have to take your wife and kids to the doctor or go to church or something on your half days, if you want to work an afternoon as opposed to the morning, that's fine. Just let me know. Anyway, on this day, he didn't show up for work. And I figured, well, maybe he's coming at 1 o'clock, which is why I was in the house at 1 o'clock calling him. Didn't get an answer. And then I was irritated because I had 4 foaling mares about to give birth, one of whom was overdue. And I had to move them up to the barn, and I had to clean the stalls. And so as I left the house shortly after 1 to go up and take care of all of these things up to the barn, which was several hundred yards away from the house and a much higher elevation. In other words, you couldn't have visual contact between the barn and the house. When I came back from the barn and didn't find Bob back from his run, I became worried, because I knew he would always tell me, I'm going to go for a short run, a longer run. I'll be gone about 45 minutes. I'll be gone 2.5 hours. And he hadn't said anything. And he had just finished running a marathon about 10 days earlier. So I knew it would probably just be a short run. He was still sort of recovering from that. Anyway, I chose to go out and look for him as it was beginning to get dark, and drove up and down the Lake Wolford Road, the large hill up to the area where we were. And finally, around 7:30, called search and rescue, or called the sheriff's department, who suggested I call search and rescue. So that first night, there was detectives in the house. There was the search and rescue team with search and rescue dog, who was off leash, sniffing all through the master bedroom. And then over the next several days, my family came. When I was told that Bob's body was found, then I had the horrifying task of calling the rest of my family and Bob's family to say that Bob has been killed. And what I was originally told is that he was hit by a car. And so there were multiple family members, detectives, search and rescue team members, scent dog, all through the master bedroom in the immediate days following Bob's death and before I was arrested.
I have a quick follow-up. You mentioned that you had like the staff, your part-time employee or full-time 7 days a week guy. Whatever happened to him, or why was he not there when he was supposed to be?
I don't ever know really why he didn't show up. He just said it was raining and he had other things to do, which was annoying to me because he had a couple of times in the year and a half that he worked for us, he had a couple of times not shown up. And I made it very, very clear that you cannot do this because it's too much work for me to do. And especially if I'm out of town for a couple of days, I can't leave it on my husband to clean all those stalls. So he just didn't show up. That's all I can really say.
Well, Jane, at this point now, you've just learned that your husband is dead. Now you're going through the trauma of being arrested. Can you kind of take us inside what your mental and physical state was like those first few weeks after Bob's death?
When I look back, I'm amazed at how very naive I was. I had no idea that I was a suspect. And now, as I sort of think back on many of the interactions with detectives, I mean, when the detectives came and searched the property and searched the house, we welcomed them with open arms. We made coffee for them and bagels and can we help you? I really thought that they were going to, help us solve this. And what happened to Bob? I was so in shock that this was happening. And I had the constant feeling as my family was gathering, our sons, our daughter, my sisters, I always had the feeling as we were sitting in the living room that, oh, wait a minute, someone's missing. And then it would hit me, oh, it's Bob. Bob is missing. As we were talking even about making some kind of plans for a funeral, I would always have this feeling like, wait, we need one more person to sit here with us as we figure this out. And it was always Bob that I was thinking of, and he wasn't there. And it would hit me again and again that, oh my gosh, he's not coming back. He's really and truly gone. And then on the day that I was arrested, I remember talking to the detective, and something that he said gave me concern. And I said, do I need to talk with a lawyer? And he said, oh, no, I can't advise you on that. And I said, I think I need to talk with a lawyer then, because I'm just not sure what this is all about. And that's exactly when they arrested me, when I asked for a lawyer.
Jane, I'm always intrigued by the people's first impressions of being incarcerated and how terrifying it must be for someone who's never been in the system. Would you mind taking us through what the process was like when you first were arrested and taken to jail? I couldn't believe it. And I kept, what was in my mind all the time is, this is a horrible big mistake, and they're going to figure it out in another day or another couple of days. They're going to figure it out, and they're going to see that this is all wrong. And we'll get back to being able to plan Bob's funeral, being able to figure out what happened, because by then I knew that the original information they gave me, that he had been hit by a car, I knew that was not the case. I knew that he'd been in some kind of a fight or something. He had been strangled and bludgeoned. So I was thinking, what could have happened to him, and how did that come about? And being imprisoned, the first jail that I was in was downtown San Diego, a tiny little cell with 3 tiers of bunks. And, walking into that cell, not knowing the 2 other women that were in there, I just felt like I can't close my eyes. I can't sleep. I can't, I just don't know who to talk to, who to trust, how to keep myself safe. It just was all foreign territory to me.
And you were in initially for what, about 3 weeks, Jane?
Yes. I think exactly 21 days.
And then when you eventually bailed out, you did a pretty lengthy interview with 48 Hours with the TV show. Why did you think that was important to do at that time?
When I don't know how 48 hours ever sort of connected with my case. I do know at one of the bail hearings, they were in the courtroom and I was, brought in from the jail and wondering why are they wanting to film my case and what is this about? And also thinking, well, good, because a big mistake has been made and I've been arrested and 48 hours will be able to provide some exposure and the mistake will be uncovered more quickly this way. I actually had faith that they would help to tell the real story.
As your first preliminary hearing approached, kind of going up what you just mentioned, were you feeling optimistic that things would be sorted out?
Yes, very much, very much. I very much thought, in fact, I very much thought things would be sorted out, that somehow what was going to come out is the truth. And somehow we were going to find out who did this to Bob. And I was going to be, I was going to be released and it would all be fine. And, I never thought it was going to take as long as it would take. But I always in the back of my mind felt like this big mistake, this big error is going to be undone and the truth will come out.
So after prelim, of course, you had the nasty surprise that they jacked your bail way up and that you had to go back to jail until your trial. What was the time like leading up to trial, in that jail cell?
Oh, it was awful. Then I was no longer placed at Las Colinas. I was then placed at the Vista County Jail and just trying to make sense of when are we ever going to be able to get to trial? And, how am I going to be able to move this process forward more quickly so that I can get this behind me? And I continue to just believe at some point it's going to be over. I remember even telling the original trial attorney, as after my trial and after he had, not after that, after my trial and the jury had come back and made a decision. And that was, I guess I have to back up a little bit. Throughout that process, a second witness came forward who had also seen Bob out jogging, seen a black pickup truck in her statement, driving very erratically, almost drove her off the road. And all within absolutely matching the first witness who saw Bob in the middle, in between two other people in this small black pickup truck, parked literally feet from where his body was later found. And so the second witness came and said, on that same day, that same Sunday afternoon, I saw that man jogging and I recognized the T-shirt, the red, U of A T-shirt that he was wearing. And in fact, I saw him twice going back and forth from the store. When that witness had come forward, my trial attorney asked the judge to allow the jury to hear that information because this was a new witness coming forward. Well, the judge didn't allow it. And so the jury continued to deliberate and then came to their decision. And I remember sitting in the cell outside the courtroom saying, it's going to be okay. This is finally going to be over. I know the jury is going to make the right decision. They're going to find me not guilty. And of course, that didn't happen. But I tell you that because that's how I was feeling. I was scared the whole time and I still couldn't believe it was happening. But I just did not believe that level of injustice would happen or could happen to a normal person who's just going about their life, doing the things they want to do in their life. And now here I am sitting in a jail cell, and there's a jury making a decision about me. It was scary.
So going back a little bit, like right before trial, can you give us an idea of how difficult it is to prepare for your defense and work with your attorneys when you're incarcerated? I mean, how often could they visit you? What kind of access did you have to case file records? If you could kind of go into that a little bit, I think people are interested in that.
Yeah. Well, first of all, when you're in jail, you only have access to a phone on the wall, which is always recorded. And so I was coached, and my family was coached very carefully by the trial attorney to not talk about the case over the phone, because anything that you say can and will be used against you. And things can be misinterpreted and so forth. So don't talk to anyone else that's in the jail. Don't talk about the case over the phone. We will come and visit you, trial attorney and investigator, and that's when you'll be brought up to speed about what's happening with your case and, you know, what we're looking into now and so forth. As the time continued on from, you know, that 2000 reincarceration in November to the time that I finally went to trial, over those months, I was continually calling, and one of the investigators, to the point where Carrie Steigerwald said, "Don't call me anymore, call the investigator, he has more information." And every time I would call the investigator, he would say pretty much the other thing.
Oh, that's frustrating.
The cold shoulder from your own team. Oh my God, I don't know what I would have done.
Yeah. And it seemed like they would call and ask me, "Do you know this person? Do you know that person?" And it seems like they were almost asking me to I don't know how to describe it. I was thinking, you're the investigator. Go and talk to these people and see what they know, and see, why do you think I might know them? Anyway, it was very, very frustrating. And I began to really feel like things are just not going my way. And I'm worrying about how much real investigation is going on. And I say that also because, one of the witnesses that ended up testifying in my first trial, the only reason the defense attorney knew about that witness is because my sister had followed a newspaper article at the time that said detectives interviewed the morning they found his body. They interviewed this witness who provided information about what she had seen, but nobody ever followed up with her. And my sister sent Carrie Steigerwald that newspaper article saying, "What about this? What's happening here?" And then he contacted her. And so I began to feel, my gosh, what sort of investigation is going on here? But it's going to sound stupid for me to say, but I continued to just feel like I'm not going to be convicted. The system, the world would not let that happen, that an innocent person would be convicted. Even though I knew there were statistics about, it does happen. It never really sort of resonated with me, because that whole interface with the criminal justice system was so far from my day-to-day life prior to that.
Jane, we hear a lot about the horror stories in the county jail in Los Angeles. What were the overall conditions like in the San Diego County Jail?
They were very strict. You had to absolutely follow the rules. Silly things like breakfast was at 4 a.m. And I guess that was to accommodate people who might be going out to court that day or something. So if you got up for breakfast and you wanted to take a piece of fruit back to your cell to eat later, that was considered a major no-no. And I guess, now all the things that I've learned after spending 19 years in prison. People making Pruno or hooch, or, making alcohol out of oranges or grapefruit or and bread is a pretty common thing in the prison system. I certainly wasn't aware of it. And I thought, how stupid. Why are they telling me I can't bring an orange back to my room? I'm going to eat it at noon or something. And that's just one very small thing about the rules. And they would toss up your cell every couple of days, pull your bedding apart, make sure that you're not hiding anything in there. And I'm thinking, what on earth did they think I could hide? I don't go anywhere. I don't leave this area. Everything is carefully controlled, what comes in and what comes out. What could I possibly have? But of course, it wasn't just me. It was everybody. They just went through the whole cell and, the whole group of cells and searched for things. And just kind of the general attitude of the jailers, basically, my keepers, was so sort of oppositional, demeaning. It was tough. It was kind of like being in a foreign world where you don't speak the language and everybody hates you, and your ability to communicate has suddenly just entirely left you. So those were things that were tough.
Jane, going back a bit, when you first knew you needed a defense attorney, how did you even go about figuring out who to hire?
Well, when I was arrested, first of all, I had no idea I was going to be arrested. And then secondly, here I am sitting in jail, and my sister is calling around trying to find who's going to be a decent defense attorney. And of course, she lived in LA area, so she didn't really know anyone in San Diego. My daughter knew one equine attorney that she had used with a sale, a horse sale a couple of years before, but none of us had any real experience. Somehow Carrie Steigerwald's name was put forward, and the urgency of me being in jail was get somebody fast, because we have to see about bail and all of those things.
Jane, as you watched your trial unfold, what were your thoughts on the integrity of the evidence being laid out to the jury?
I couldn't understand it. I couldn't, I knew what the bedroom looked like. I knew what was visible or not visible to the naked eye. So this whole thing about blood in the bedroom was sort of stunning to me. And, I'm a lot more suspicious now that I've learned so many things through, all of the work with these great attorneys and some of the things that you've done, Mehul. And I kept thinking, this just can't be. This just cannot be. And how can this be put forward as credible? You
mentioned that when the evidence was being laid out before the jury, and you were kind of like, I kind of, my takeaway from that was that you were shocked by how it was being portrayed. Is that correct?
Yeah, I do remember vividly the portrayal of me, or the use of a hammer, that the weapon had to be a hammer, even though I knew, and I couldn't understand how the jury wouldn't. I knew that that there was no hammer in the house. There was no, how could they say with certainty that a hammer was the murder weapon when they didn't have it? And they just sort of created a scenario and wanted everyone to buy into it just based on pretty much speculation.
It must have felt like you were like, are they talking about my case?
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
How can you were living there, it's your house, the scene, right? And then all this is coming across to the jury and you're going, wait, am I in the wrong room? I'm in the wrong courtroom?
Yeah, right. Yeah. It just seemed so unreal, so absolutely unreal.
After you were convicted, how, you mentioned this a couple of times now, so obviously it had a huge impact, as it would for anyone. How long did it take for it to sink in that prison was your new reality for the foreseeable future?
Yeah, I remember asking, how long does an appeal take? And he had said probably about a year. And I'm thinking, oh, I cannot survive a year. I can't. I just, And then when I got to prison and learned that the success rate of appeals is in the neighborhood of 4%, I thought, oh, how can this be? The other thing that was, because I was moved after the jury decision, I was moved almost immediately, within a matter of days, up to prison, up to the CCWF, Chowchilla. And I can so clearly remember when you're a new lifer coming to prison, they put you in a particular building, and you're very restricted. To me, it felt like a mausoleum. There were cement bunks, 2 per cell, and no window, one very long, thin, maybe 4 inches wide and 4 feet tall, to allow light into the cell, but with I don't know, shaded glass or something, so you couldn't really see out. And all the cement and I just felt so confined, and I had a lot of trouble sleeping initially because it felt so claustrophobic. And, I just felt like this can't be my life. This just cannot be my life. I have to figure out how to get the truth out. And it was a big, somehow it helped me to say, okay, I've always been a big believer in the old adage, if it's to be, it's up to me. And so I started really thinking, okay, now I'm going to have to figure out a way how to help myself. And I'm not a lawyer, but maybe I can learn some things here. And so I almost immediately was able to get a job in the law library and started trying to learn about the law. And even that was so difficult. I would think I'd look up these cases, and one of the things that I thought, oh, look, here's a kind of a ground you could use, miscarriage of justice. My whole, me being sent to prison, it's a miscarriage of justice. So I can use this case, and looking up all the references with that case. And then someone told me farther down the road, oh, no, that's a sort of a last resort grounds that you use, miscarriage of justice. You have to start, looking for Brady violations or ineffective assistance of counsel or all these other things. And I'm thinking, well, how am I supposed to know that miscarriage of justice, that's what I feel has happened to me, that it's a huge miscarriage? And how am I supposed to know how to approach any of this? But, that's what I did. And I started writing to every organization I could think of, asking for some kind of legal help. And time went on.
Well, it's good that, instead of gangbanging and getting tattoos and lifting weights, you were working on your case. But I also know that you were working on some advocacy for trying to help other people as well while you were in prison. Can you kind of describe some of that work?
Yeah. It just became so immediately obvious to me that prison is not a place that is going to really help anyone or heal anyone. And I do know that many of the women that I was surrounded by had done really bad things. But were they the same person now that they had been in prison for a while? Or what was it that caused them to do this violent act? And so many women were survivors of domestic violence and finally determining to defend themselves. And then instead of actually defending themselves, they end up in prison with a murder conviction. So, I just started looking at how can we sort of help women become more of who they really are. This is the community that we have right now. This is the community that we're living in, and it's prison, and it's horrible, and it's very restrictive. But we can work hard to not let that turn us into some kind of horrible creature. We can still be kind and generous to one another. So, I did silly little things like, I don't know, trying to have a little bit of a garden in the prison system, which didn't go over very well. and then I more formally asked the warden, and I went through the formal process of saying, what would be wrong with having a community garden? Maybe we could teach women to eat a little more healthy. And what's wrong with having some of these things? And didn't really get very far on it, but trying to find ways to make women kinder to one another. And also, I'll tell you one of the things, working in the law library, it became obvious to me as a law clerk in the library, my role was to help women find resources for anything that they might need in terms of doing their own appeal or what's called a 602, a grievance against some condition in the prison system, et cetera. And so many women would come into the law library and they would say, Miss Jane, I know when I was sentenced and I was in the courtroom and the judge said to me, okay, you've accepted this plea bargain now and you understand you're going to do 2 years with half time. And the woman in front of me would say, I swear that is what the judge said, 2 years with half time. And now I get into prison and the counselor tells me, oh, no, you see, because you have a different controlling case, and many of the women had, several charges against them. The counselor would say, because of your controlling case, you really have to do 4 years at 85% instead of 2 years with half time. And that happened so frequently that I became suspicious about how can this be that, women clearly remember or tell me that they clearly remember the judge saying one thing and then they get to prison and the sentence is different. Well, I learned sort of early on to help the woman find their abstract of judgment and their minute order, which is, kind of like the transcript of what happened in the courtroom when the judge was sentencing them. And sure enough, right there in bold print is 2 years with half time. So we would start a process of writing to that judge saying, dear Judge so-and-so, I clearly remember you giving me this sentence, and here's the minute order to verify. And now the prison system is telling me I have to do, 4 years at 85%. And the judge would say, sometimes we'd get a letter back. Sometimes we would just get a correction from the case manager services in the prison system. Okay, we've corrected now, and you really are doing 2 years with half time. But it happened over and over and over again. And myself and another woman, would always sort of win that fight. And I was horrified that the case that the woman was, upholding 2 years with half time, it was always in favor of adding more time to the prison sentence. In other words, the case manager or the counselor would say 4 years at 85%, which of course would make the woman do much more time in prison. And how does a woman fight back against that and say, but I know the judge told me this. Anyway, we were quite effective at doing that, and probably as many as 40 or even 50 cases.
Whoa, that's a big number.
Wow, that's incredible that you were doing that work and that you got those results. Did that start giving you hope for your own case?
Well, yes and no. I mean, it gave me hope for my own case, but it also horrified me at how can this be? This is so.
What do you think that was about?
Blatant.
What do you think was the motivation behind that on their end?
Well, I suppose at some point you could say there is some margin for, an honest error.
Not 40 times. And
when it always goes, not 40 times and not always going in the direction of adding time. And so, all I can think, and I began to learn, I was reading Golden Gulag, Ruthie Wilson Gilmore's book on the prison industrial complex. And I began to educate myself about the prison industrial complex and who really benefits from this, and the guards union and how powerful they were, and how the guards union finances so many of the victims' rights groups.
Mass incarceration pays well.
Yes, exactly. And so, that's what was happening. And I was just, it was funny because I would go to an aerobics class as many nights as they would offer it. After dinner, they would often have an aerobics class in the gymnasium, and I'd be in the aerobics class with 20 or 30 other women, and we'd all be working out. Some woman would come running in, interrupting the class, tears streaming down her face, hugging me, saying, I just got this back from the judge. Look, they have to release me next week. Thank you. And I'm thinking to myself, geez, how long ago was it that I helped her? I can hardly remember her case, but I'm so happy we got the right results.
Yeah, justice moves slowly.
Yes.
It sounds like that purpose, the advocacy that you were doing really gave you a sense of purpose, and as much as it could help you keep your mind going in the right direction and staying positive. Is that a fair statement?
Yeah, very much. It's hard to make sense of anything in the prison system because so many stupid rules. And, you can get a write-up in the prison system for having an extra state towel in your cell. You can be beaten down in so many ways that it's hard to sort of maintain your own integrity and your own identity. And I was determined early on that I was not going to let that happen to me, that I was going to make sure that I stayed myself and stayed fighting for myself and stayed, sort of in pursuit of what's decent. And so it was a big help to me to be able to do that. It sustained me through those years.
Thank you for listening to the Crime Redefined podcast. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter at Crime Redefined. Please send us your comments and questions and join us for the next episode.